Article 61. Mrs. Boykin.
That the town vote to appropriate $500,000 to pay for the survey and design of a sewer system serving the southern end of Park Street from near Ash Street to the town line and the Campanella Industrial Park, including easement acquisitions and related work, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $500,000 under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 22, or any other enabling authority.
Mr. Feehan.
This article is to design a sewer system for the southern end of Park Street. And I think as far as the limits of the study area, if you look in your booklet, page 164, it'll show you a map which more or less gives you the limits. And the extent of the area goes from the town line at Arcade Plaza, right at the Brockton line, up to Turnpike Street and along Park Street, even further, all the way past Ash Street to Pano Drive. It would also include Campanelli Park. It's all shown on that map. The one thing I want to caution you is this map shows 3 pump stations. The actual location of the pump stations would be determined during design. So, you know, they may or may not end up exactly where they're shown on the map. This area of town is clearly in desperate need of sewer. I don't know if anybody, and I'm sure you've all been down there at some point, and you know we have a significant shopping center down there that has some on-site sewage problems. We have restaurants, we have other businesses that desperately need a sewer system. There's also the Campanelli Industrial Park. If you've driven down there, you'll see some enormous buildings that are all underutilized. We, over the last couple of years, got a number of phone calls from the people down there asking, are there any plans for sewer, any plans, because they just cannot fully utilize their complex due to the lack of sewers. So the sewer, what's proposed here is to design a system of sewers down there, and the sewers would be to assist the existing businesses who are having problems. It would provide sewers for underutilized businesses, like especially in Campanelli Park, and it would help overall increase the financial tax base of the town. And the betterments that would be accrued as part of this and assessed as part of this will be determined during the design, and that would come up in the actual construction article. But what I want to suggest to you is that this article is not just about sewer betterments. The construction of this program would increase the tax base of the town far in excess of the cost of the system that it will take to sewer them. I think it's really the one article in town meeting that will more than pay for itself. You know, the town has already undertaken the expansion of the library. We're talking about expanding the schools, and a proactive article like this is really necessary to expand the tax base to help fund some of this new construction. The businessmen down in that area, when they heard about this article that was, you know, this got inserted in the agenda last fall, they got together and funded a small study of the area to help support this article. They hired an engineering consultant to do a quick study, and that's who actually developed the plan that you're looking at in that page. They hired a financial consultant to analyze the impact that this construction would have on the tax base of the town. And if, you know, in his report, which was a 22-page report, is just full of reasons why this would be beneficial to the overall tax rate of the town. If anybody has any specific questions on the financial impacts, I actually have that consultant here tonight, and he could answer that. But I just ask your support for this article to provide a desperately needed system of sewers in an area of town that will benefit not only the people in that area, but the town as a whole. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh.
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. There was nothing I could do when this article became before the Board of Selectmen, because I own property that this sewer will go by. I had to leave the table. So this is my only opportunity to discuss this. Now, if the cost of the design is $500,000, imagine what the project's actually going to cost. I've only been coming to town meeting for 36 years. We have never, ever approved a sewer with 3 sewer pumping stations. Can you imagine what that's going to cost? Now, if you look at the green sheet and you listen to the speaker, business, increase the tax base, commercial viability, and that the problem with the businesses and the businesses. This is a neighborhood. Now, when you drive down Route 27 Park Street, maybe you don't see us, but we live there. People live on 10th Street, people live on Park Street, people live in this area. We simply can't afford this. The last time this project came up, my assessment was going to be $13,000, and that was before we had the idea of 3 pumping stations. When this was heard before the Committee on Finance and Taxation, not a single resident appeared in favor of this article. The businesses had a representative, and I was there to represent my neighborhood, and I said we were opposed, and we are. I happen to own the largest, lucky me, thanks Mom and Dad, but I inherited the family farm, so I have the largest frontage of any of these properties. And if you know how betterments are assessed, it's assessed by frontage. I'll literally be pushed out of my home. These businesses created their own problem. Longtime residents know that these businesses used to be a lot smaller. When they were originally built, the septic system worked fine. But they increased the size of their businesses without increasing the size of their septic system. They increased their footprint, they increased their occupancy. Now, when you go down Campanelli Drive, that's warehousing. How many bathrooms, how many showers in warehousing? The reason those buildings are empty is the reason why buildings are empty in Stoughton Square, the reason why buildings are empty across the nation. It has very little to do with sewer. I say these people created their problem, they should solve their problem, and not put their problem on the backs of the people that have lived in this area for generations. The property, one property away from me has been in the same family for 5 generations. And the proposed sewer assessment, the last time they were going to put sewer through for their property was $250,000. That's not a betterment for any of us. And making my property more valuable and my tax bill higher is not doing me any favors. If the businesses have a problem, they should solve their problem without involving the people that have lived there for generations and have no problem with their septic systems.
Mr. Carrara.
Scott Carrara, Precinct 2. Just to let you know, what Cynthia said is very true. But what I want you people to know is that there isn't enough residents along this sewer extension to make up the betterment of all what this is going to cost. There is so much ledge in Campanelli Drive. You want to see it? Drive in, take a look at the building on the left. The ledge sticks up above the roof line, because that building is down below. Do you think that guy's going to want to hook up the sewer? This sheet here that you've been given, existing businesses operate under a major financial handicap, paying on an average 115% more in sewage disposal fees. Then underneath it says, properties served by municipal sewer are assessed $250% higher. They contradict themselves. That doesn't even make sense. The worst thing is, you're going to run thousands and thousands of feet of sewer that's going to lay dead. We don't have any letters of commitment from anybody. He can tell you businesses came and said, oh, I'm going to jump on board, we're going to be on board. Until you get letters of commitment, and I sat on this board over here, you need petitions, you need open hearings, you need people that say, I'm going to get on board. And to say we're going to figure out how to finance this as we go along, these gentlemen here and this one lady have a process how to do it. If the street has 10 houses, they divide it up. 10 into whatever the cost was. You people will be picking up the extra cost. After they raise the rates next week, then there'll be another raise on the rates. There'll be nobody that will not fund this. It's not going to be just the people that go buy this. This thing is expansive. This is almost as big as what took place when they did the Lincoln Street area and all down there. But I will tell you, there is several areas in town with residents, older residents. There's a gentleman in my precinct right now going to be putting in an $18,000 septic system when he could put in a $4,000 septic sewer if it had gone by there. There is no sewer from Park Ave all the way to Prospect Street. And you could sewer every street off of that area there with not one pumping station. And every resident in that area needs it. Every house, you'll see it. Title V's failed. There isn't enough residents, and if there's businesses down there, Cynthia said it. Let them find a way. There was to, and I'll put this through you, Mr. Moderator, to this gentleman over here. Under Title V, if you pump more than 3 times in a year, is that a system failure?
I don't believe so.
Under Title V, it is.
No.
If you pump more times than 3 in a year, it becomes a system failure. Who's pumping twice a day down there, and he has been pumping right along?
There are people that pump quite a bit down there.
Yeah,
Yes.
quite a bit. Please, think about this. This one here is going to be the heavy hitter, the silent death amongst us all in here. This is a very, very dangerous expansion. They don't know what they're going to hit, and I'm just telling you, I know this stuff, I've done this. This is very, very expensive, and there isn't enough people that are going to get down there, and the commitments, if there was any, will dry up when they see what they got to pay. Thank you.
Had that perfectly timed, Scott. Mr. Frankel.
I just have a quick question for Mr. Feehan, if I can, through you, Mr. Moderator. What is the anticipated total cost of the project in its completion?
My cost estimate is about $5 million at the current time. I just make a few points in response to the prior speakers. I don't know where to begin, but as far as the ledge, for example, I've seen a ledge. Now, I want you to understand, I spent 30 years working for engineering companies designing sewers for cities and towns all over the state of Massachusetts. So it's not like I've never seen a sewer, designed a sewer before. And I know ledge when I see it. I know the cost that that ledge brings to the job, but there are also ways of mitigating some of that. I also told you that this plan shows 3 pump stations, but 3 may not be needed. This was done by an engineering firm that the businesses down there hired to do a quick study. I agree that there's going to be a pump station needed somewhere near the town line. and I believe there's going to be a pump station down in the corner on Campanelli. The third one they show, which is about near 10th Street, I don't really think that's going to be needed at that point. But if you look at that plan, I want to also point out to you, and I didn't mention this before, that if this system was constructed, then it could be extended in the future to serve the residential streets such as Corbett Road, 10th Street, 9th Street, Bisbee. This whole area could then be sewered. The previous speaker mentioned the need for sewers in many areas of town, and it's really the approach that's been taken in the past that's hurting. You know, you can only go so far in constructing sewers and then saying, I'm going to do this piece of street and I'm going to charge the people in the street. What happens when you follow that policy is the sewer gets put in to serve that street. There's no thought for somebody else in the future that needs the extension down the road. In many cases, the sewer has to be extra deep in this area to be extended in the future to somebody else. But if the homeowners in this area, the ones that are paying, they don't want it extra deep. We just had somebody in the office last week at the end of Ash Street who wanted to tie into the sewer. We look at the sewer in Ash Street, it didn't go to the corner. Why didn't it go to the corner? Because probably somebody, I wasn't here at the time, I'm not sure why, but the sewer was put up the street, didn't go to the corner houses couldn't connect. And we went through this just last week with the property owner there. But those are the problems when you take a piecemeal approach to sewer design. And to get back to the project we're talking about here, and property owners who have large lots, as one of the speakers said, the plans are, when the betterment policy is created for this project, that the betterment for somebody with a large lot, rather than force that property owner to sell or to subdivide it, that assessment gets suspended until such time as the property owner sells. And that's been historically how towns deal with that issue, because this is not the first time it's come up that a sewer is going to go by a large lot. You don't want to force a property owner to have to subdivide. You suspend the assessment till the time that property owner either sells or subdivides, and then they pay the betterment. So there are ways of dealing with this. And this type of, the planning for this will be part of the design that will take place in the next year. So I hope you get the picture that this is bigger than just serving the businesses down there. If this improves the end of town, revitalizes the businesses, and expands the area, the taxes that the town would recoup from that would far exceed the cost of the project.
Young lady.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Shannon, Precinct 3. I just wanted to put another face to the property owners on Park Street. When we moved here approximately 2.5 years ago, I jokingly told the real estate agent that I was here for life and they'd have to cart me out of the house in a body bag. I didn't anticipate that maybe that would be necessary much sooner. I know that myself and my neighbors, none of us are in a very good financial situation. We've suffered 2 unemployments in our household. Our neighbors have both on either side been unemployed and or suffered financial difficulty. If it's true that this is not going to impact us financially at all until we sell our home, and should that come a time when it's further down the line, I'm in a body bag, then I'm happy for that, but I'd like to have an assurance of that because otherwise we may be forced to sell. So I just wanted to put yet another face to the situation. Thank you.
Mr. Morton.
John Morton, Precinct 3. I have a little background on this matter because a previous Board of Selectmen appointed me to head up a negotiating team with the businesses on Park Street who desperately needed the sewer. Starting from the Brockton line, there's a shopping area, and moving down there are restaurants and other businesses that needed the sewer. A committee was formed, and before I was appointed to that group, to negotiate with the merchants along Park Street and to see if they would finance a portion of the cost, at least of the study, and even of the sewer. Those negotiations failed, and so the previous board asked me to head up the committee and continue the negotiations with the merchants. I had probably 5, 6, or 7 meetings and sent memos back and forth to the group. And it was very clear to me that the need was real for the merchants, but at that time, nobody was willing to stand up and help finance this, while they were complaining about the cost of repeating pumping and about the cost of maintaining their septic systems and about the not being able to expand. They also were not willing to come up with a penny at that time to support this study or even the construction of the sewer. Furthermore, a couple of the merchants that we were talking to had designs to buy additional property on Park Street and to build, in that case it was retail outlets, on Park Street. And they were very anxious to have a sewer so that they could do that. It was my position at the time, and it remains my position today, that those merchants who would benefit enormously and immediately from that sewer should step forward and fund some of this project, even beyond their normal assessments, because they will have immediate benefit, and it will allow them to expand across the street and in other areas along Park Street. I have the greatest respect for the previous speaker and regret that I have to come up here and say I don't think we should do this now. First of all, the town will not die or fall apart if this thing is delayed a year or two, and we can talk again to the merchants and see if they are willing to step up and do a little more than just pay an assessment that could break some of the residents along that street. And second, we could get a much stronger fix on what it will cost, and we'd manage to survive this long without it. I don't think this is the proper approach or the proper time to do this, and while I see and agree with the previous speaker that there's a return here, the return is not assured, and the return may be on the backs of people who are not particularly suffering now from lack of sewer, and the benefit may go disproportionately to a few who could afford to step forward and help the town finance this. So I'm not going to support this article, but I will say I support the notion that at some point we should try to find a way to put a sewer on Park Street, and we should look for a way to finance it that's not going to drive some people out of town while benefiting others really substantially in the short term.
There's a gentleman over, Mrs. Carrara.
Stephanie Carrara, Precinct 2. Mr. Feehan, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Feehan, you referred to Arcade Plaza on Park Street that would be very interested in this sewer expansion, correct?
I didn't use that name, no. I didn't specifically refer to any business.
I thought you said Arcade Plaza because.
Well, I said there was a pump station shown on the plan, I believe, across the street. If you look at the map, that pump station is shown across the street from Arcade Plaza.
Well, the reason why Arcade Plaza is a huge flag with me, I was the zoning secretary several years ago, and a local attorney came in representing some businesses that were going in that plaza. And a huge approving point for the zoning board was, and I'm not speaking for them, I'm just recalling from my own experience at that hearing, was that they were going to tie in with Brockton because the sewer was right over the line.
And Arcade Plaza has been trying to tie into Brockton by itself for quite a few years.
But when that local attorney came to the zoning board and was representing some businesses that were going in that plaza, they already had a deal with Brockton to tie in. So I think there's some miscommunication, and you may want to refer to that zoning case to see exactly what was said.
I know there was discussions about them tying into Brockton that happened even before I was with the town. I've been here 4 years. It happened before that. to the point where they actually put in pipes from Arcade Plaza to the town line. But as of today, that pipe is still not connected to Brockton.
What I
Because
think,
Brockton is prevented from the septic.
correct, but when that attorney was representing them, what I'm trying to say is, they said they already had a deal and that they were going to tie in, and that's why the zoning board voted for that.
Well, they
That was,
didn't, the deal was not complete because they have not tied in.
I think you should refer to that case, Ben.
I'm not saying they didn't, that attorney probably said he had a deal, but I'm telling you that they had not tied in yet.
There was some other information that may help enlighten some work being done on that end of Park Street. That's all I'm bringing to your attention.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. Is there a master plan of storage needs that's out there with priorities through you to maybe the town planner or the engineer, town engineer?
What was the question, please?
Is there a master plan of the town that shows what areas need storage, need town storage in priority?
There's no recent master plan for sewers.
I-
But there is a need for sewers in many areas.
Yes, I thought
Yeah.
there was something that showed the need. And my second question is about the comment by the Finance Committee, betterment to be paid upon the transfer of property. Is that something, that's not part of the motion? Who decides that? Is that the Board of Selectmen?
The betterments would, as I stated before, part of the study, part of the design is going to include the preparation of a betterment policy to fund the construction. So when the construction article comes before town meeting, it will include a betterment plan. And that betterment plan will be assessing costs to the abutters down there. Previous speaker talked about the businesses not coming up with money. Actually, as I mentioned to you, there was a group of businesses down there as recently as last fall who come up with money to do a study, both a small engineering study, a small economic study. So the businesses did come up with a small amount of money to fund those studies.
So if I understand this correctly, this article is all on us. There is no betterment going out until you start doing.
Until the design, until the construction, I'm sorry.
So again, Article 61 is going to be paid for by the town of Stoughton and not by the property owners.
This is front-ended by the town, right, and the cost is recovered when we get to construction.
Well, then the construction part, but not this part.
You can't assess betterments on just a design. See, you
All
can
right.
only assess betterments in construction.
Thank you.
Mr. Hersey.
Hi, Scott Hersey, Precinct 4. I think the sewer is a good thing because we don't get any business redevelopment without the sewer out there. And I'd love to own a big chunk of land on Park Street with sewer to leave to my grandchildren or nieces and nephews. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Martyr, through you to the some member of the Board of Selectmen. Not him, no. Isn't it true that the tax rates weighted heavily on businesses versus residential? And could you tell us or enlighten us what the differential is?
Could you repeat the question?
I asked for someone from the Board of Selectmen. I figured they could answer that. You waiting for Bob? Town manager? All right, so what we just heard was the rates for commercial property owners versus residential properties is something like 2 to 1. Now, there are some people in this room that'll tell you that Stoughton is a business-friendly town. I'm not so sure about that, from what I've seen going on even recently with a person in the square that's trying to relocate into a vacant lot. these businesses that are in need, not only should they be considered, because if they are funding our town by a 2-to-1 rate, then we should be giving them some consideration, and we should be thinking about them. The businesses, these are the people that provide jobs to a lot of residents in Stoughton, and I would guess, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I would guess that the businesses along Park Street provide jobs for maybe some folks that are sitting here, maybe some of your children, I don't know. But the point is, it seems like it would be a worthwhile project. I can't believe that the town of Stoughton has a major artery, Route 27, between Brockton and the center of Stoughton, and we don't have a sewer in it to promote that kind of development. So, you know, I think businesses get a bad rap sometimes, and I think this is a time where the businesses are saying, you know, we've all done a lot for the town, we need some help here, and I think that we should consider that. Thank you.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I worked in the sewer industry for 50 years, all over New England, putting intercept the sewers. And the problem here is, not just with this particular article, the town needs a master plan for sewers for the whole town. All sewers run gravity as much as possible, so they follow brooks, go through swamps, because everything in the high grounds is going to flow to the brooks, or to the swamps, the low area. And that eliminates a need for all these pumping stations. And also, like Mr. Fian says, sometimes run a gravity feed, you might have a 40-foot cut from point A to point B, and if it's too deep, if you can't do it with steel sheeting and stuff like that to shore up the ground, then you tunnel it. But that's the way it's been done for hundreds of years. Now, in all the years I've been doing this work, I've never seen a town or a city with as many pumping stations as we have here, and the reason is just what we're doing, patchwork. Somebody needs a sewer here, so to get from A to B, we got to pump it with a pumping station. So I'd like to see sewers get in everywhere. I live in Canton Street, which is Route 27 in the western part of town. I would love to have sewer there. But the town does not have a master plan. And up until a few years ago, up to the 80s, with the Clean Water Act, most cities and towns, the federal government reimbursed them 85 to 90% of the cost. Stoughton was asleep at the wheel. That's all I want to say.
Mr. O'Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob O'Regan. I'm no longer from Precinct 1. Well, I am, but I'm not over here anymore. In a former life, I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and so I asked to speak just to let you know that this opportunity for the sewer line is the result of a cluster zone development that was approved. I believe the name of it is Forest Green, but I always had trouble with the name. I kept hearing some TV show theme song when the project came up. And part of the consideration for that project was the cluster of homes upgrade and then conservation land below along Park Street, through which the town is given an easement for bringing the sewer down onto Park Street. And in the course of those public hearings, the zoning board was told that the business community along Park Street was committed, although details didn't come before us and it wouldn't be appropriate for it to do so, was committed to making the finances of getting the sewer system along Park Street to work. I am aware that there is a businessmen's association and business persons association formed to promote the development of the sewer along this area of the town. There are two words that you've heard tonight that just also ring loudly to me, which is master plan. I mean, I can't believe I'm hearing this. This is, am I in the right place? Master plan. We're at a stage in this part of town where somebody's got to make the first move, where somebody's got to say, as a matter of policy, we're going to look into the cost-benefit analysis for the community. We can't do that until we invest in the process of figuring out what the engineering is, what the cost will be, engage those property owners, businesses, in the discussion for how do we meet those costs. We can't do it. If we don't do these kinds of things to build the business base for this town and to make the area, the residents in those areas of town, have soil that's clean. Now, this is also a major environmental concern for the community as a place to live. Make the ground better and safer so we can dine in a restaurant along that area and leave after a good meal. So think about the policy questions and the master plan in this kind of a warrant article. I can't vote, so I don't presume to do anything as far as to say how I would or wouldn't vote. But I want to ask you to think about what this means to us as a community and how we're making decisions to go forward. We can't ask the businesses and the residents to do anything for us as a community until, as a community, we try to say this is where we want to go. This is one of those articles. It really, really is. And we can address some of the concerns and how we deal with the property owners in coming up with a plan for the betterment assessment once we put ourselves in the position of having the discussion. If we continue this, we won't discuss it until we know what the result of the discussion is. We never have it. And when we don't have that discussion, guess where we get? Day 9. Ted Koppel's going to start doing his show again on town meeting. This is day 625 of the Stoughton Town meeting. That's what we get. So I'd ask you to give those thoughts some consideration when you vote on this article. Thank you.
Mr. Gito.
There's been a lot said about this article. I agree with many of the points of view. Do it now and figure out how to deal with the people later, or wait a while and figure out how to deal with the people and then sell the whole package to town meeting. I guess I'm of the latter opinion. I think that we should have been smart enough as a community to figure out that there were going to be problems and to begin to deal with those and not have people wondering what was going to happen after we spent $500,000 to do a plan and then come back, knowing that it was going to cost about $5 million and it was going to have to be funded. And how are the people going to pay for it? I think that the town has enough information to be able to say, well, if it were a $5 million project, then how would we deal with that? And come back and say, we deal with it this way. This is a fair way to do it. I think that the town eventually and soon needs to sewer that part of town. It's not only the people on Park Street, Campanelli Drive, but a much larger area. But, we have an engineering department that can figure out a whole lot of what needs to be done. We can get detailed plans, construction plans, when we get to that point. But we should be able to put together enough information for us to make a fair and rational decision. So I'm hoping that we get that information, and then I'll vote for this, but not until then. Thank you.
Mrs. Boykin.
Holly Boykin, Precinct 2. The previous speaker, basically, I feel I have to talk about the finances here a little bit. I totally agree that if you want to put this off, then you should, but I would strongly urge that in the next year or two, you have to try and find a way to develop revenue in this community. And that area is probably one, if you look at the build out of the town, the master plan and what we have in terms of businesses, that probably is your growth area, one of the priority growth areas for major revenues. You just talked about sewer fees going up, water fees going up, trash pickup fees going up. The only way, if you guys don't want to start cutting back on services, you're going to have to find ways to increase your revenue. And if you don't want it on the backs of property owners, the only other way to do it is to be able to build up businesses in this community. Whether it's revitalization in the center of town, whether it's putting in sewer and getting businesses to hook up and increasing business fees there, because you got to remember, they pay a larger proportion. They're assessed. You also get larger user fees from businesses, so there are more fees than just. I totally agree that if we can pay this back and take the burden off, I think it's approximately 64 to 80 property owners in that area, that we should do that. And if we can look to have a betterment policy, then I strongly believe we should. But I don't think you can keep putting off, in deference to all the people who talk about taxpayers and ratepayers and residents and things like that, you cannot keep putting off and increasing the fees of you, the people that sit here, when you have to find another way of revenue. The only other option will be, in a couple of years, unfortunately, if we keep using one-time revenues and things like that, or the stabilization fund, you're not going to have any. So you really need to develop into your master plan a strong financial and capital plan. The master water fund one that we did tonight for $4.48 million, the fees that we have to pay 10 years is $448,000 a year, starting in 2014. You need to clearly identify what the priorities are for the community, what your debt is going to be, how you're going to attack that debt. Otherwise, you guys are, if you don't do a 2.5 override, a 2.5 debt exclusion, or something else, and find a way, you're going to unfortunately have to be cutting your budgets. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I do think that we have to find a way to balance the way we get revenue in this town. So if you're not going to vote on this tonight, that's fine, but I would recommend that you develop a master plan quickly, and you look to try and find other sources of the next revenue, and then yet next year or two, because you've got to remember, it doesn't hit for at least 3 years. Hopefully we'll put $3 million aside in stabilization, but it's only going to trickle the budget. If the state goes belly up next year, that could be used very easily. So you guys, I was sorry. I don't want to end it that way, but that's my role.
Mr. Guerin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to ask the question is, how much have we borrowed so far this year?
How much have we borrowed for
How much have we committed to borrow this year?
$9,533,000.
Wow, that's
539. $9,539,000.
You hear that sound, ladies and gentlemen? That's the Proposition 2.5 that's running down the track at us right now. We've got a library we passed, $7 million. We got a brand new high school we're talking about. We just spent $1 million on painting a tank. We spent $5 million on putting new water lines in town. There's got to be a stop to this thing here. This is nuts. This is what we're doing here tonight. This has got to be turned down. We'll do it later on. Now is not the time. Thank you.
Mr. Manley. That's to cut off debate, and only to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries to cut off debate. As this has been a very controversial article, I am going to ask that we take a standing count. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take a count. Precinct 1.
0.
Precinct 2. Precinct 2, 2. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 4. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 1. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 3. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 6. Precinct 8. Precinct 8. We got how many? 3? All those opposed, please rise and chairman take a count. Precinct 1.
13.
Precinct 1 is 13. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 18. Precinct 3. 10. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4. Precinct 4, 7. Precinct 5, 11. Precinct 5, 13 and 1. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 10. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 6. The motion is lost. 21 yes, 89 no. Motion carries. It is now 10:28. Mr. Cohn. No, because then I'll be here at 8 o'clock. 7:30. Yeah, then you'll never get here. It's 7:30 on Wednesday.